Taxes. Old school deck. And over on the other side, you see Christopher Minor, 4-color loam. Not what we've been seeing throughout the day. A unique matchup here, and what I really enjoy watching, actually. There's a lot of interesting interactions here.
This is just a couple of old school decks. These decks have been around for forever, and that's sort of the nice thing about Legacies. Maybe you get a few upgrades here and there. I know that Death and Taxes has gotten things like Palace Jailer and Recruiter of the Guard, stuff like that. Sanctum Prelate's another reasonable add.
Right.
And then the 4-color loam deck, mostly just the same, I think. You see people experimenting with weird Green Sun Zenith's targets here and there, but that's about it.
Tenjum with the classic start of turn 1 Aether Vial from Death and Taxes. Follow up, Umezawa's Jite. Looks like only one land on the part of Minor there. Not exactly where you want to start.
Yeah, turn 2 Jite, you would expect Tenjum to also have a 1-drop to go along with it, but Death and Taxes is pretty heavy on its 3-drops also.
Absolutely.
So it wouldn't surprise me if Tenjum has a 2-mana card and a 3-mana card, both ready to deploy on this turn, and the next turn he can get to work with Rashad Port, maybe equipping Jite and actually getting in there, but with the 4-color lone player stuck on lands, might just be an easy victory for Tenjum, but we'll see if his opponent can get out of this.
Yeah, it has to be a scary point for Minor right now. You never want to be stuck on only 1 mana, but especially when your opponent has Rashad Port. Also going to be forced to fetch a basic here, Fearing Wasteland. Probably correct, but it's going to be really hard. The 4-color loam strategy is mana intensive. It relies on things like Mox Diamond to accelerate itself. A lot of more expensive spells in the deck. Of course, Liliana of the Veil, 3-mana Planeswalker. That's a high cost for Legacy. We're used to very cheap spells carrying the day.
Yeah, and you see in Minor's hand, he does have a copy of Mox Diamond, but it requires another land to use.
Right.
Mox Diamond, I think initially people made the mistake of, well, it's a mana source, so we'll just play it instead of a land, but you need actual lands to fuel it. So if anything, Mox Diamond should make you want to play more lands, and the 4-color loam deck does a good job of doing that, but sometimes you end up in these awkward scenarios where you have a Mox Diamond and you're short on mana.
Right. Yeah, I think Minor's deck is built appropriately. He has considered that he needs more lands. Playing 26 here, which seems like the right amount to me. A lot of utility lands included in that, things like Maze of Ith, Ghost Quarter, Cabal Pit. Of course, Grove of the Burn Willows to power up Punishing Fire, but it just kind of feels like this one may already be slipping away. There you see, I believe, just a Palace Jailer coming down to create the Monarch and get Tenjum some extra cards in hand.
Yeah, this is one of the cards that is supremely punishing. If you are stable or ahead, you're probably going to be the Monarch for a while. And now this small white creature aggressive deck has this card drawing engine online, which is kind of unheard of.
Right. Yeah, it's a unique angle for the deck to get access to. There you see a Mox Diamond. It must mean we found a land. Looks like we're going to pitch the Cabal Pit, and the follow-up is the Sylvan Library. So that should help get out of the mana screw that Chris is currently experiencing, but maybe too little too late now that Palace Jailer has come down and made Tenjum the Monarch. You see Palace Jailer usually used as like a Necrotal type effect to answer an opposing creature, but it also has this bonus of just creating the Monarch as well.
Very strong card, and you don't normally see Death and Taxes going up to 4 mana cards, at least pre-board. Post-board, when games slow down a little bit, maybe they'll turn to Cataclysm or Gideon Ally of Zendikar or something like that. But this is the 1 4-mana card that is strong enough to actually make it into the main deck.
Right.
And actually, Minor's deck has 27 land because the Dryad Arbor is hiding out in the creature slot.
So okay.
He has plenty of lands in his deck. I think keeping a 1-land hand in this sort of deck is completely fine.
I agree with you. Going to go ahead and use that ability on the Sylvan Library to take a look at some extra cards in this draw step. Of course, can pay life if Minor wants to get some more in hand. Not going to, just going to use it to rearrange the top of the library. There you see a land, and that's going to lead to a Chalice of the Void on 1. Not the ideal time for Chalice to do its thing, but you take what you can get at this point.
If Tenjum had a 1-mana creature, he would have deployed it already for sure, but this is a way to preemptively stop any Swords to Plowshares.
Of course.
Minor potentially looking to set up a creature, but it can be difficult through this Jite that's already active.
Yeah, I mean, if you've played against Jite any amount, you know how it just snowballs the game very quickly. There's going to be no blocks offered, basically, for the rest of the game for a Minor because the creatures can either be pumped or your creatures can be shrunk. It's just a nightmare card to play against once it's active.
Yeah, and Tenjum just kind of has it all at this point. He has the two Roshan ports to lock up Miner's mana. He has Aether Vial to be able to still deploy a bunch of creatures, even if they're somewhat expensive, despite having the port tying up his own mana. He has the Monarch going. He's got a bunch of equipment active to him.
Yep, we're going to add a Stoneforge Mystic to the list here. It's going to go ahead and find a Sword of Fire and Ice. Just too much of a stumble for Miner, really. Tough to overcome.
Legacy's fast.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not fast in the... I would expect to die to Storm combo on turn 2 every single game, but the games can often be decided by turn 3 or so.
Agreed. Here is a Wasteland going to go ahead and take care of another land from Miner. Go ahead and draw a card from the Monarch. Activate those ports. Here we have Abrupt Decay.
So I think step 1 was sticking a Chalice to protect a creature. Step 2 is finding a way to kill the Jite, for sure. And with Miner still stuck on lands, still looks pretty tough. I think even by the time he gets to land this Dark Confidant, he might be at such a low life total. But obviously the Sylvan can help with that a little bit. Be able to rearrange your top cards.
Definitely an uphill battle, but you see Miner doing his best to crawl out right now.
And are making their way to the berries board on green paper. Please find your seats. Again, Modern Classic.
I've heard people occasionally mention Jite as a card that should be considered for unbanning in Modern. What's your take on that, Jerry?
I think power level wise, it is likely on par with the other things that people are capable of doing in Modern. However, I don't feel like it promotes very good gameplay.
Yeah. I think that's a fair point, and certainly something that should be considered when making these decisions on whether or not to release a card into the card pool. Just not going to enjoy a lot of games where Jite is the focal point.
In theory, it is able to make creature decks stronger because it gives them a reasonable payoff for playing a bunch of random bodies.
Right.
But at the same time, it kind of also invalidates those
Correct.
decks.
Yeah, it's an awkward double-edged sword. So right now, the Sword of Fire and Ice is going to work, and Tenjum's white weenie deck is just drawing so many cards per turn at this point. I don't know how Miner can possibly overcome such efficiency. Going to go ahead and throw a Punching Fire at that Stoneforge Mystic to take it off the battlefield.
Well, white weenie is kind of a misnomer to the point where the Danes, who are very, very excellent Death and Taxes players, Thomas Enevoldsen is probably the most notable, but Michael Bonda also. And they call it mono-white control.
I think that's a fair descriptor. If you've played any games against Death and Taxes, you know it absolutely has the capability to go long.
It uses creatures to control the battlefield and certainly pressure its control and combo opponents. But for the most part, you do just assemble this unwinnable board state a lot of the time. Either it's like Mother of Runes plus Thalia, Guardian of Thraben against the combo decks, or, you know, Mother of Runes kind of plays into a lot of this where you're trying to actually lock up the game. So Mother of Runes plus creature plus equipment, that's also really good against the Delver decks. And it's just a matter of whether or not the white deck can get to that point before they lose the game.
Of course. So Miner trying to crawl out of this predicament with the aid of Dark Confidant, but with that Sword of Fire and Ice active presently, I just don't think he's going to be able to find the outs here. Tenjum going to go ahead and activate Aether Vial. What is the 3-drop here?
I just always assume it's a Flicker Wisp.
Me too. It seems like it always is Flicker Wisp.
Hey!
And in fact, there is the 3/1 flyer. Going to go ahead and blink that Chalice of the Void. It means we're going to cast some 1-drops here. What does Tenjum have? Swords to Plowshare is the guess. Yep. There goes Dark Confidant. Headed to the bin.
Flicker Wisp is probably the most unassuming card in the deck where you see it and you're just like, well, this card has just never seen play in any other format, in any other deck. Like, how good can this card possibly be?
Insane.
And you see all these little neat tricks that the deck can actually do in combination with Aether Vial and Flicker Wisp, where here it's pretty simple. It just resets a Chalice. And it makes the Chalice come back as Chalice on 0, which Death and Taxes doesn't really care about. But there's also just like weird things where like your end step, you can Violent, Flicker Wisp, exile their land, so your opponent's short a land on their turn, which is another form of mana denial.
One of the best usages of Flicker Wisp, one of the hallmarks of a good Death and Taxes player is their use of Flicker Wisp and what they can get out of the card.
And now you see a Phyrexian Revoker on Mox Diamond, furthering the mana denial element of the deck, and that's going to be it.
Yeah, Chris Minor has seen enough. Can't blame him. Just a awkward start there. Not really able to get any footing. Missed the land drop, and that can be backbreaking against a deck like Death and Taxes, which can snowball an advantage very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the mana denial element coming out of Death and Taxes, it's huge. You can't fall behind. Like, there are a lot of decks in Legacy, usually the fair ones, that play extra mana sources in order to kind of blunt the effect of things like Rashad and Port and Wasteland.
I wonder if Miner knew what he was up against when keeping the one land hand. Obviously, no way of knowing, but was punished for it. Why don't we go ahead and take a look at the sideboards here? We'll start on Christopher Miner's side. We're looking at 3 Leyline of the Void, 2 Cindervines, 2 Thalia, 2 Swords to Plowshares, 2 Golgari Charm, 1 Liliana the Last Hope, 1 Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale?
At Pendrell Vale.
I thought it was of Pendrell Vale for a second, but I'm glad I got it right. Some card I can't quite make out, actually. Do you know what card that is? We'll figure that one out.
A Johnny Vegent?
I know a Johnny Vengeance. I've played that card a lot. I believe that card is...
Queen Marchesa.
Queen Marchesa. We'll get that up on the board for you when we come back to the battlefield. But why don't we go ahead and decide what we're bringing in on the 4-color loam side.
Some of the coolest sideboard options exist in this 4-color loam deck, and you see this Chris's sideboard doesn't really look like any other sideboard for a normal deck that you would see in Legacy. You got a little bit of everything, some Graveyard Hate, some Cindervines, which I like seeing. But for this matchup, I definitely like anything that can pick off things with 1 toughness. So Golgari Charm and Liliana the Last Hope are definitely going to be all-stars here. Swords to Plowshares are also pretty nice. Worth noting that the main deck doesn't play any 1-mana cards because of Chalice of the Void, and it's primarily being set to 1. And Swords to Plowshares is usually there for a matchup where Chalice is going to come out. And
Correct.
Death and Taxes is exactly one of those matchups. So I would expect some additional creature removal to be coming in, maybe the Ajani Vengeant to have a bigger, stickier threat. You could use Cindervines as a way to destroy equipment, but with things like Abrupt Decay already in the mix, you maybe don't need that.
Yeah, I could see maybe like just padding your removal suite a little bit, adding 1 Cindervines.
Yeah, and of course Tabernacle is quite good against the Death and Taxes deck. It seems kind of weird because Miner was the one who was kind of stuck on mana that game, but that's sort of his game plan too against these creature decks, and Tabernacle goes a long way to punishing them after you actually limit their mana options.
Very true. Jared, do you know what Queen Marchesa does?
Something with the Monarch, right?
Yeah, we'll talk about it in a bit. It's an exciting one. So let's go ahead over to Tenjum's sideboard here. Looks like we're looking at a copy of Sanctum Prelate, 1 Pithing Needle, 1 Leonin Relic Warder, 2 Surgical Extractions, 2 Path to Exiles, 2 Aethersworn Canonist, 2 Cataclysm, 3 Council's Judgment, and finally 1 copy of Walking Ballista. What do you like from Tenjum here?
Walking Ballista is nice.
Yeah, very cool.
But not necessarily great for this matchup. What Tenjum needs is some additional ways to remove Miner's difficult to deal with permanents, so I would expect some amount of Council's Judgments to come in. You don't want to be too reactive in this matchup, but it does help having outs to things like Sylvan Library and any of the Planeswalkers that Miner's presenting. So just Tenjum knows that he's probably going to be playing a longer game. And things like Cataclysm are just brutal in these types of matchups. Like any sort of mid-range deck, Cataclysm is exactly the card you want. You saw in Game 1, Tenjum had a Flagstones of Trocaire, which is just full combo mode.
Oh, yeah.
With Cataclysm.
Gotta love the self-land destruction Flagstones of Trocaire combo. Well, if you want to pick up some of these wild sideboard cards like Queen Marchesa, why not head over to the Star City Games Spring Sale? I'm not guaranteeing the Queen is on sale over there, but take a look. You never know what you're going to find in the Spring Sale at go.starcitygames.com/sale. What are you on the lookout for these days, Jerry? What do you need to complete your collection?
I'm mostly pretty good. I don't know. I think I need a 4th Odyssey Japanese Entomb.
Okay. Well, go take a look at the Spring Sale. Maybe you'll get lucky. You never know.
I'm kind of busy right now.
Okay, sorry. We'll
Remind me
wait a
later.
little bit.
Remind me later.
I will. I'll make sure you get on top of that. So players still shuffling up for Game 2 here. Why don't we give you a couple updates from the other tables. In the modern matchup, Mono Green Tron up a game against Is It Phoenix. That's a matchup we've seen a lot recently. You and I talked a bit on our podcast about how we think Tron is pretty well positioned to take down the Is It Phoenix menace. And that's something that's played out a few times on camera over the course of this tournament.
And it's worth noting that Team BCW had the option to put Ross Merriam, basically the progenitor of the Is It Phoenix deck, in the modern seat. They chose not to. Had Ross play Standard instead so that Jim Davis could play Tron. And normally you want to like maximize each seat, right? You want the the best player at Legacy to be playing Legacy. And I think it's probably a toss-up for who is a stronger Modern player, Ross or Jim. Both of them have extensive pedigrees and everything. But it's hard to argue with the person who effectively created and popularized the de facto best deck not playing the best deck. But I think that says a lot about where the format is headed right now.
I think you're spot on. Meanwhile, over in Standard, we're looking at another classic, Mono Red Aggro versus Mono Blue Aggro. You see Joe Bernal is up a game in that matchup presently, 1-0.
A lot of people talk about how Mono Red Aggro just absolutely demolishes Mono Blue, but if you look at the numbers, it's not like that.
A lot of people are wrong, Jerry. A lot of people are wrong.
The more spell heavy, the more burn heavy that Mono Red Aggro gets, the worse and worse they get against Mono Blue because they become more susceptible to things like Spell Pierce and Dive Down, and things like Tempest Djinn backed by one of those cards is often game breaking.
Yeah, we've also seen the mono blue lists have some points of differentiation. Obviously, the more vulnerable creatures you have to things like Chain Whirler, the worse the matchup gets. But some people are giving up on Mistcloak Herald at this point. We saw decks with just Surge Mare and no more Mistcloak Herald.
And Joe Bernal among them.
Right.
2 copies of Surge Mare main deck. No Mistcloak Heralds in the 75.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's a great approach. But despite that, Mono Red Aggro just evened up the match, 1 game apiece over in Standard right now.
Well, I said Mono Blue Aggro was probably the favorite, but it's still close.
It's close.
Especially, being on the play is super huge in those matchups.
Yeah, I think so. So we're back to our Legacy match. Both players just leading on lands here. A much kinder start for Christopher Miner this time. Looks like we're going to go ahead and start on a Scavenging Ooze.
And no Aether Vial from Tenjum is huge.
Yeah, it certainly slows down the Death and Taxes player a little bit, but here's a fine turn too. Stoneforge Mystic. There it is, Queen Marchesa. Let's talk about this card. It is a Mardu card, 4 mana.
Love it.
Death Touch Haste. When Queen Marchesa enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent is the Monarch, put a 1/1 black assassin creature token with Death Touch and Haste onto the battlefield. So if Tenjum is able to claim the Monarch, can get Queen Marchesa down, battle it that way. I think the Monarch will be an interesting point of contention in this game. It's obviously Tenjum's primary card advantage source. I mean, Palace Jailer should still be in the deck at this point, right? There's no way that's left.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if you don't expect your opponent to have creatures, they're still playing this mid-range removal strategy, you want to become the Monarch so you can start drawing those cards.
For sure.
Miner, a little bit stuck on mana because he only has Taiga and Grove of the Burn Willow, so only red and green mana available to him with things like Dark Confidant, Liliana of the Veil, and Light from the Loam kind of stuck in hand. Plays out a Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale.
Mm-hmm. Can be a problematic card for the Death and Taxes player, for sure. Definitely going to slow down the aggression, make them play things very slowly. But here is an activation from Stoneforge Mystic. Going to go ahead and put Batterskull into play. That'll speed things up a little bit.
Where's that Brian Braun doing, Germ token? Come on, Tenjum.
One of my favorite germs of all time is BBD.
I might say it's my favorite germ.
Okay. So turn's going to pass back to Tenjum here. Going to have to account for that Tabernacle. Let's see if he wants to keep Stoneforge Mystic around or if he wants access to mana. Is going to pay for the Germ. Are we going to pay for Stoneforge Mystic? I think it's a debatable point, right?
Yeah, it depends on what Tenjum has going on in his hand. Obviously, he wants to deploy some more spells, maybe activate that Rishadan port, but it's also awkward because you don't want to just be sacrificing creatures, putting them in the graveyard for that Scavenging Ooze to eat, and then the Scavenging Ooze can potentially hold off the Germ token.
So here comes the Germ. Going to go ahead and get in for 4 points of life-linking damage. Going to drop Miner down to 16. Raise up Tenjum's life total just a pinch. Headed to 22. Any follow-up from Tenjum? Nope, just going to go ahead and leave mana open for port. Let's see if we get an activation here. Going to let the Tabernacle resolve first.
Yeah, it says go ahead and pay for that first, then I'll port you. I don't want you to float mana and then just get a free payment.
Looks like no activation on the port, though, from Tenjum.
So another Stoneforge Mystic activation coming in, perhaps.
Maybe. Here's a Liliana of the Veil, though. Nice play from Miner. Going to answer some threat here. Let's see what it is. In response to the activation, we're going to go ahead and activate Stoneforge Mystic. It is going to put in Jite.
So running black sources for Miner, that's basically exactly what he needed. Still, though, this deck is 4-color, and he only has Jund mana available to him. Knight of the Reliquary sitting in hand, which is arguably the most powerful card in the deck.
For sure, but it comes at a large cost, right? It's difficult to get your mana in order for this kind of strategy. You are fairly reliant on things like Mox Diamond to get you there. No Mox Diamonds in this game. Looks like we're going to go ahead and equip GT here.
Yeah, fetch lands are also super important, both for just fixing your colors and fueling life from the loam.
Right, and none this game, awkwardly. That's a big germ now.
We've seen this before. The germ just gets out of control.
Yep. And there is a block from the Scavenging News. That's going to put 2 counters on GT. Liliana of the Veil still sitting in play. For how long is the question? Is it going to be able to accrue some advantage?
I mean, it's going to be tough with the GTA, right? The block for Miner there makes sense because otherwise the GTA is just going to get 2 counters and be able to pick off the ooze anyway.
Right.
So that prevents maybe his Liliana of the Veil from dying, but then he's going to either have to remove the germ or present some blocker that doesn't actually die to a GTA activation, which seems difficult. So it seems like Miner's board is slowly going to be slipping away here.
And Mom coming to the party. Mother of Runes going to be ready on the next turn to start protecting Tenjum's creatures. Liliana going to tick up, discarding, looks like life from the loam on Miner's side, and a Flagstones over on Tenjum's side.
No, Tenjum, you're supposed to keep that for the Cataclysm.
Here's a Dark Confidant from Miner, going to look to recoup some card advantage here. But we know GTA just sitting in play, ready to pick it off at a moment's notice.
Yeah, this is one of the things about GTA where it just makes all creatures look so silly.
It does. It does. So we're going to go ahead and pay for both of our creatures under the Tabernacle. I think that Dark Confidant's purpose was just to eat a counter here, but not achieving a whole lot, quite frankly.
Yeah, the problem is Miner didn't have anything else really going on.
Right. There you see Germ Token rumbling in, taking down Liliana of the Veil, gaining even more life for Tenjum.
Obviously, playing Dark Confidant into a GTA, an active GTA, is not something you want to be doing, but if you have literally nothing else to do with your mana and you're just going to be effectively losing anyway, you might as well.
Tenjum says it's time to port. Going to look to take Miner off red mana. That's interesting. He could have taken him off black mana, which would have cut off things like, say, Abrupt Decay. Wonder what was the impetus for Tenjum choosing to target the red mana instead. But appears it has worked out. We're going to head back to Tenjum's turn.
I don't know. I mean, there are things like Punishing Fire that is not very effective right now.
Right.
I would also maybe just be concerned about the black mana, but...
Here comes that Germ again. We're going to go ahead and cash in some of these GTA counters, I believe. Make a rather large Germ. I think we got in for 10 points of damage there. Let's see as we get our life totals updated.
That's not bad. 2-turn clock.
Yeah.
Pad Tenjum's life total by a lot.
Yep. Mom protection at the ready. Things are looking very grim right now for Miner. And it feels like Tenjum just has it all, but he hasn't actually played that many cards. It's just his cards were so incredibly impactful. Really only
a
3
Stoneforge
cards.
Mystic.
Yeah, and the Mom. You could give Mom credit, but it's done nothing thus far. It's just there as like insurance. But yeah, Stoneforge Mystic completely carried the day here. 1 Stoneforge Mystic and a naturally drawn equipment. Meanwhile, over in our modern match, Ambrosio has taken down Matthew Hoey with Mono Green Tron, and Tenjum going to get the check mark here. Extends the hand, and we have a deadlocked match. That means the mono blue aggro versus mono red aggro matchup is ultimately going to decide who is victorious here.
Now we get to see who's actually the favorite.
Hopefully we're going to get into a game 3 that still has some action left in it. I don't know quite where we are in that one. Here we go. We're on the battlefield. Looks like 2 Gitu Lava runners over on the side of Crespo. Meanwhile, Bernal, 4 islands. Try and pick out some of these cards here.
Surge Mare Tempest Djinn and Exclusion Mage.
I think you got it. I think you got it right.
Could be wrong about the Exclusion Mage. Yeah, it looks like Bernal has done a better job of making his land drops and playing out these, I want to say defensive creatures because they have a lot of toughness, which is normally the important part against mono red. But it looks like Crespo's actually been taking some early beatdowns.
Yeah, life totals are now correct. You see Crespo sitting at 16 life. Bernal at a very comfortable 19 life. When you have 4 lands in play, 3 creatures, and you're at 19 life against mono red, things have gone very well for you in the early game.
Absolutely. And Joe's obviously in a good spot. He has a 5-power flyer, now a second 5-power flyer, while his opponent is stuck on lands a little bit.
Tempest Djinn bringing the beats right there, and this could be over just as quickly as we got here. Let's see what Crespo has to try and get out of this one.
Unsurprisingly, a bunch of spells.
That's generally how it goes when you only have 2 lands sitting on the battlefield. Some mana issues for the team of Miner, Ambrosio, and Crespo this round, for sure. Crespo has that kind of resigned look on face right now.
Yeah, it's not looking good. What should I do?
Just mugging for the camera a bit, enjoying the time in the feature match area at this point, because it's hard to believe there's many outs to those flying Djinns on the other side of the battlefield.
Standard classic players, that is time in the round. Active player.
And that's even assuming that Joe doesn't have another copy of Dive Down,
Oh,
Spell
yeah.
Pierce.
Anything, really.
Players, that
Anything.
is time in the round.
Looks like the team has found a play they like. Like in quotation marks.
Yeah.
All right, we found a 3rd land. It's going to allow for Chain Whirler to come down.
Freddie says, you take one.
Big beats. Gonna have to fade an island here. The old lethal island off the top.
Well, Joe is at a point where if he draws a land or a spell, he's pretty happy.
There's a land. There's the Djinns coming in, and that is going to do it for the team of Tenjum, Hoey, and Bernal. They remain the only unblemished team in our entire tournament.